Oh, thank you, Leila. We incorporated the feedback that you provided during the last meeting, and we're hoping to get this finalized and get it posted. So I can try to present. I think I can do it. Are you able to see the draft?
Not
Oh,
yet.
I did
Not
share
yet.
once more. Sorry. There we go. Hopefully you see it now. Are you all seeing it?
I think it's loading. Oh,
Okay.
okay.
And Layla, could you send out, I know I didn't give you much warning. Would you mind to send it out to the group and so they can all look at it at their own pace and not have to depend on my speed for scrolling?
Sure.
Okay. So Chris, I believe that you had suggested that we go with the formal name and we're not able to find that anywhere. So is that information that you have?
Probably I've got to go back to the statute. Um,
Okay.
but and I don't have my notes in front of me that you guys don't you hadn't put in the ORS somewhere, had you?
Layla, did you ever have that? I feel like at one
I
point.
can go find. Don't worry about it. I'll go find it.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. That's really helpful.
Is it the
Okay.
funding stream you're trying to find? Like the behavioral health housing incentive fund?
Yeah, it was just whatever the name of. We renamed it because we had to because we moved it from Housing and Community Services to OHA. So LC gave it a different name.
Okay.
Yeah, I
I think
think I have
Housing for
that.
Mental Health was the old name.
Correct. I believe it's the behavioral health housing incentive fund now.
Okay. That's really helpful. Thank you. So we'll make that note. Um, and we went over this before, so some of this is repeat of information. So thanks for bearing with us on that. So you can see that we still um, weren't sure about what the low cost threshold would need to be to have that definitive in here. And that's, you know, going to be more about decisions, but also information that on some level we would want to include in the solicitation. So I think
Was there not email correspondence about this? I thought that sort of got highlighted from the last NOFA that went out.
there was, and it's the information that we received, thank you so much for sending that to us, Dana. It was very specific to supportive housing. And that's not going to be a lot of what this solicitation is for this one. So it was helpful for that, but we don't have low cost threshold for licensed mental health housing or behavioral health housing or SUD or anything like that. So what part of what our thinking was on this was to maybe align with BOLI's threshold of prevailing wage projects, and that is that if it's $749,000 or less, it's considered a low cost project. So how do people feel about that?
Well, I have no appreciation of real estate other than my house. But I mean, the low cost threshold, I'll just give you an example, was designed. So the conversation around that had to do with, if I'm out in a community and I buy a duplex and I reserve both units for SMI, we don't want to just say 35%. So that I only raised that as sort of
Oh,
the
okay.
intent of what that was. It was about
Mhm.
really recognizing in rural areas the scale will be maybe vastly different than in urban areas. And
Okay,
and it
okay.
was recognition of that scale. So does that mean whatever threshold, so what'd you say, LaDonna, 735 or like
749 or below.
749? Yeah, I guess I would say, if that meets sort of modern threshold of what a project might be, given the buckets that we're dividing funding into, then that would be a good threshold. But I would still think you'd want some confirmation or some indication from our folks. Well, I just don't know how you make that valid, right? How do you validate that that's an appropriate amount in given the projects that we're soliciting?
Well, I mean, I think what if we use that as a guideline, but when it's in question, we could bring it to you all as an advisory group and say, here's what we have,
Okay.
here's our thinking on it. So we could have that sort of caveat to that part, just staffing it with you to see if does the advisory group believe that this is a low cost project based on A, B, C, D?
I think that makes sense.
The only thing I would be concerned about, LaDonna, is I wouldn't want I wouldn't want somebody to not apply because they're not sure what this means or they think that it doesn't apply to them when it does. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the more specific we can be in here so that people who are applying understand this, I think the better off we are.
Okay,
Megan,
so
do you have an idea, Megan, of like sort of what that threshold would be given a rural scale?
I really don't, I don't, because it can be so different even from one rural location to
Yeah.
another. And especially right now, because some rural locations are experiencing a lot of urban renewal and others aren't. So you almost do need like a, uh, a real estate expert who understands the differences in the different communities. And I don't know anybody like that off the top of my head.
Well,
But
I
there,
think in absence of that, at least the bully thing is a standard.
yeah.
Is that LaDonna, is that a prevailing wage thing related to real estate?
it is.
Yeah.
Whenever any projects that have even $1 of public funds is at 750 or above, they're required to submit a what's it called, Elizabeth, that they submit to determine they
Yeah, so it's through Bully. They do a Bully determination, um, like assessment basically, and then Bully will provide them with a determination letter to say, yes, you need to comply with prevailing wage requirements, or no, this does not meet the threshold for that. So that was kind of where our thought was going with that 749,999 essentially threshold of like if it's over that amount, then they do have to they do have to comply with prevailing wage requirements, which can result in the cost of the project going up a bit. Um, so that was kind of where our mind was going in terms of trying to define a threshold, because I agree that having a very distinct limit there for people to use to kind of determine, do I meet that, do I not, would be really helpful. Um,
So
so
that's the threshold that would apply to the project in terms of wages. So the proposal is to tie what considers making sure that's a consistent definition. Because if it does go to, let's say, $820,000, that developer is going to have to pay prevailing wage if they accept a grant out of this fund. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, well, so any public works fund. So if they were to get funding from this source, and let's say they have funding from another public source, that would all be factored into that determination.
Okay.
So cumulatively, that funding would be considered in that determination. Um, so we always kind of encourage them to do that with Bully directly. We can't make that determination, but that's what we know from Bully is kind of their threshold. But again, they look at the big picture when they do that evaluation with the provider.
So if that makes sense, I mean it's a guideline that we're aligning with another, governmental agency, I guess. Um, are we ready to move on? Do you want, we can circle back to this or we can continue?
I think based on what you guys are describing as an existing standard, it makes sense to peg something to that standard. Then the question is, do you have, Megan has articulated that certainty is more helpful than not, maybe in terms of encouraging someone to apply. But Boley has a sort of let's talk about it standard as well. And I'm guessing they have certain criteria that go along with those. Would OHA be able to develop sort of here? Let's say you're in the ballpark, but over. Hey, here are elements that contribute to, and for lack of a better term, an exception.
In terms of, I mean, we can definitely provide the links to bullies. We can include that in this information too, like if that would be helpful for them to get some additional contextual knowledge of that determination. Is that what you're thinking, Chris?
Well, I don't. So I'm flying blind here because I don't know what their additional criteria are. What I'm suggesting is in absence of us knowing certain market conditions for developing these type of projects, particularly in rural areas, if there is an exception to being low cost in the analysis that the health authority does or we do as a scoring committee, should we not lay out? I don't know how pertinent the Boley stuff is. If it can directly copy over and it's really pertinent and it would help us as a committee provide feedback saying, yeah, okay, we're going to make an exception here. It's in the ballpark in terms of cost. We're going to label this low cost.
I get what you're saying.
Is that okay? And if Boley's criteria are appropriate for the health authority lens, then great, let's copy it. If not, should we not, if we're going to make exceptions, should we not have sort of, and here's factors that could lead to an exception A, B, and C.
In terms of being awarded this funding, right?
Yeah, like it serves a frontier area, like stuff like that. Like I don't know what those would be, but I would think geography could be one of them, right?
Definitely. And did we say that at the beginning of this?
Let's see. So it does say that OHA has the discretion to waive the 35% limit for low cost project or to meet critical need in a rural area. And I think one of the questions down below does hit on is it in a rural area and the needs associated with it, and requires them to provide some additional information.
Yeah, I'm just using it as an example of additional criteria. So, again, this is just speaking out loud. I'm not making this as a suggestion, but you're already saying rural, and then you say, but you can go over if you're in a frontier area, for example, right? And so you would lay out, if you're going to make exceptions, you would lay out 2, 3, 4 very important factors that then open the negotiation period to be able to make a determination that something can exceed that cap.
Yeah, like a frontier area or serving an underserved population.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are two good ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking too. If we know what the gaps are in the system, then using that criteria to help fill those particular gaps.
Yeah. That's a better way to put it, Sissy.
Could we put it like that, like what Sissy just said? Sissy's my mentor, y'all.
I think you lay out, I think we hit on two things. Frontier area can lead to an exception. Underserved population or priority population could lead to that. Probably maybe a third factor because the group of threes, right? Use the law of threes.
Understood. You said underserved population. We'd go with location, underserved population. And then we could just say projects below $750,000.
Right. Yeah. That are in a rural area.
Projects below, but yes. Funding amount. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds great. We got there, guys. That's good. All right.
Thank you, Chris, for doing the heavy lifting.
Yes, thank you, Chris. We are always so glad you're here. You have so much knowledge that is so helpful to all of us. We'd be lost without you. Okay, so the highlighted areas are changes or additions. So we did specifically spell out, what the Oregon's health equity definition is there.
Yeah, we had this down below, I think, in the area where we ask for attachments, and we felt like it was just better to move this up and have it called out at the beginning. So that was uh, the reason for this shift.
So any feedback or questions about that change? And if there's not a yellow highlight, then it's the same. We did do a little slight bit of format changing here to the project category table. I'll give you a chance to give you a second to look at that.
Yeah, I don't think that changed from the last time we presented it to the
Okay.
group, though. Yeah, we
Okay.
tried to really be mindful of highlighting um,
I
any
wasn't in that meeting.
changes. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, LaDonna. So
No,
that's why, yeah.
thank you. Thank you for that. I
And
forgot.
if I remember the conversation right, because again, I still have my concern of mixing so many unlike things into one bucket. We were going to look at
Mhm.
what comes in, right? And then sort of
Yeah,
decide, yeah, okay. Thank you for
yeah,
refreshing my memory.
yeah, definitely. And then I think I see this highlighted area here. This is where the rural urban. I don't know if we want to add frontier. I've heard that some counties are slightly offended by that label, so that was one reason we didn't spell out here.
I would just say if you want something to be considered low cost, but it exceeds the cap, and we use frontier as the thing, that there ought to be something on the application that at least asks that question.
Okay.
I think it's defined like, I think it's a term by whoever does the census stuff. So we could get that reference.
I think the OHSU Office of Rural Health uses those definitions as well in their stuff. I mean, this has been part of
Okay.
all the conversations over the years with these issues.
Yeah. And we use it in rural when
Okay.
we refer to mobile crisis. So it's throughout the system currently.
Hmm.
So if we, I'm just saying, not that it's wrong that we change it, but that if we change it, I think it needs to be a bigger conversation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Elizabeth is capturing the feedback and then we'll get it put in here and
Yeah.
Layla's taking the meeting notes too.
May I ask a quick
So
follow-up
this,
question, LaDonna, before we
yeah,
move on
yeah,
from that one?
please.
So on this one, do we
Yeah.
want to specify a separate piece of this or a separate question that really identifies frontier? We can include the definition. Is that what we're thinking then?
Mhm.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And that would be a common definition that people who use that term would be familiar with, right? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I mean, it is defined. Like I said, the state has used those definitions elsewhere. They use the terms everywhere. They don't always have them defined, but I believe they're defined in rule because they're referenced in rule. As Sissy said,
Mhm.
mobile crisis
Mhm.
is one area.
Yeah, and we could include that rule link as Sissy had suggested too. I think that's a really good suggestion. Okay, and I think we were able to get through the low cost question, so I think we're good here. We can, and then the location part speaks to it above. And then we will talk in the introduction as well about if the population it serves. And so to that end, do we want to include another question about that that's specific to the underserved population, or do you think that's covered in another part of this, Elizabeth? Is it covered?
Um, well, we do. So we say, please identify the culturally and linguistically appropriate services provided to minoritized. Oop, I lost
Is
it.
it? I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Oh,
It's one of the bullets for the short answers.
oh,
Um,
yes, there it is.
right
There it
above.
is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So and we can expand off this further or make it a bit more specific. Whatever the group thinks would be most helpful um, to get valuable feedback from the responses.
In my
Yeah.
mind, I think of an underserved population maybe as a bigger pie within which you may have cultural or linguistic concerns.
Mhm.
But there might be people in the bigger pie of underserved that don't necessarily have cultural or linguistic reasons for why they're underserved. It may just be a matter of geography, or it may be something else, you know, lack of access to reliable transportation, or, something else that factors into why they're underserved. So I think we need to get clearer about that.
So I did just add, so appropriate, culturally and linguistically appropriate services provided to minoritized and underserved communities to broaden that category and broaden the potential responses that we would get.
Which is helpful, but again, it may not have anything to do with culture or language. The reason why they're underserved may have to do with something else. So maybe if you said,
Okay.
please identify the culturally and linguistically appropriate services or the health-related social needs addressed, provided to, that's a long sentence though.
I'm wondering if we do maybe two separate kind of sub bullets
Yeah.
for this one and just do kind of a, you know, please tell us about, and then we can do
Yeah.
one, and then a separate one for each. So that way they have the opportunity to respond to both of those separately.
Yeah.
I would think then for low cost, we'll want more elaboration. So I'm thinking, so what we're asking is, how are you going to, if someone comes across your doorstep who speaks a different language, how are you going to serve them? Versus, hey, we're going to do a whole program that's really focused on Spanish speakers. So I would think to qualify, if you're going to go over the cap that we established for low cost and you're going to say, I'm going to serve a priority population, it's more than we can serve anybody who comes across our doorstep. It's really, we're going to focus
Yeah.
on this population, and that's the heart of our service delivery.
What we could, I like where you went with that. What we could say is please identify in detail.
Yeah, I mean, but I would put that question with the do I qualify, does your project qualify for low cost? Yes, one of the logic things that then pops up is it's more than just this.
Okay.
Because that's what we want to see, right? And I'm just making stuff up as always. But let's say they focus on LGBTQ plus, like they're going to orient all their services around that. They'll be able to serve everybody, right? Because they have to, but they're going to have that special feature and
Yeah.
or Spanish speaking or whatever that is, and then that enhances their ability to serve an underserved population and then qualify for low cost.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We could do it as one of the questions up above and do, does your project prioritize and serve or prioritize an underserved population in your area, yes or no? And if they say yes, we can ask them to respond with more of a short answer, and then just leave this one specific to the question that's already there. Does that sound good?
Yeah, with the sub bullets, yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
'cause everybody should be expected to do these things,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
right? So it's not necessarily enhanced in terms of focusing on a
Mm-hmm.
specific underserved
Yeah.
population.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that will hopefully help us get away from canned language around those questions because we see that a lot and
Yeah.
it's not what we want. So this was added based on feedback from the previous meeting, the highlighted statement question.
Yes, this was an addition to try to get some and I think Chris, you had brought this up too about wanting to kind of get more details about their kind of practices and implementation. So um, this was kind of a question that we developed to highlight that without getting too specific because we want to recognize too that maybe some of these don't have it fully developed yet. Perhaps it's more conceptual. So allowing them to share that information without requiring that they, have a detailed uh, process handbook or something in place already, if that makes sense.
It
So when
does. Is it worth adding some sub bullets though, sort of giving parameters around which or focal like this is pretty vague. So my fear is it's going to lead to very subjective judgment on like somebody's going to be a better writer than the other person, and they may be saying the same thing, but because the other person's a better writer and able to articulate, like I'm just again sort of thinking about pitfalls. Sorry, I jumped in front of you, Dan. Go ahead. I'll shut up.
No, I was just going off of what you said because that's exactly kind of what I was thinking about several of these questions is that I can appreciate that, we're casting a wide net here, so like driving down too narrowly on the questions is not the goal, but I do think we're opening ourselves up for a lot of unclear responses or like we don't want to have a million questions when we're reading the responses. We want to have a pretty robust picture of what they're aiming to do, what they're capable of, and their expertise. And so I think we're going to want to flesh some of these out a bit. Definitely what Chris is talking about, and I think the first one about a project proposal, like what do we mean by operational sustainability? Like what are our expectations? And we probably want to see an operational budget. I don't think we want just a narrative about operational sustainability. We want to see how something pencils, I would think. I mean, if I'm misunderstanding like where we expect people to be at this stage, tell me to cool my jets. I'm just thinking from like a development perspective.
And I think that piece is where it's so critical in the affordable housing arena. I think for more of the licensed behavioral health and SUD, it's going to be around their ability to bill Medicaid.
Okay. Yeah, I think because I'm assuming we are the reviewers of these applications, and yeah, and I am imagine the understanding of the mental health services world is pretty robust in this group. Mine is not, so I would want to like make sure that like you know, whatever they tell us, like we can be like, okay, yes, that is a valid response, and operationally that makes sense if Medicaid is, but how can we expect them to explain that? And like, so let's drive to getting the explanation you need.
So the way that used to happen, Dana, is OHA's so they would turn in some detailed financial projections, costs and projections, and then OHA's financial people would score that section of the application because they had the expertise there. And so there would be a general question sort of like this that lay people like me or you could sort of get at. And then we had the confidence that people with more knowledge of finances of these things had put their eyes on it and said, okay, this makes sense. Is that going to happen in this process?
That hasn't been a piece of the process since I've been here, but we do have a budget analyst that we could have look at these so we could incorporate that. That it hasn't been the practice lately. I mean, I think when that was the practice, there was probably a lot less funding than there is now, but it's something we do have the ability to incorporate that.
Well, I think given the fiscal environment we're in, we don't want to give out money to somebody who doesn't know how to manage a business. And that would be an important financial check.
Mhm. Yep. And we can do that.
And I would think within the Medicaid department or elsewhere, there's people who know the financing of ongoing operations.
That comes up in our compliance reviews sometimes too, is that we want to make sure that, and it used to be a component like for adult foster homes before licensing, but it's no longer, but that there's some fiscal um, parameters around access to savings and business plans and things like that, which is a really good idea because solvency is really important if we don't want to burn through the money.
Yeah, I think we'd all look kind of dumb if we gave money to a project that closed a year later.
Yeah.
Well, and just given the environment right now, I think a lot of people are going to be interested in this, but some of them will probably be more able to manage a project than others, just depending on what happens at the federal level in the next few months.
Yeah, and one of the ways that OHA protects investments, the investments of these funds, is that we record a declaration of restrictive covenants, so it's a use restriction. So that's a way of protecting the investment as well.
And I would think in the strategy process and practices, again, let's, some of the bullet things I would want to know are just, and again, I'm just speaking out loud. I'm not saying, but like, what is their admissions process like? Like what is their staffing philosophy? I mean, I'm just making up stuff here. I'm not saying this is it, but like, I want to know, I want little bullets to tell me, reveal to me how the business occurs day to day within the milieu of your space, and then how do you as an organization support your staff and equip your staff to deliver that care? What is the training like? Things like that. And then you'll forgive me. I'm going to go off. I've got to return a call from the governor's office, and so you guys all know, if the governor calls, you gotta go. I gotta go. So I'll be right back, hopefully.
Okay. So are we feeling pretty clear on that for next steps, Elizabeth?
I see Dana has her hand up too, and
I'm sorry, I
yeah,
didn't
I
see
wanted,
that.
no worries.
No, you're good. Yeah, I was just gonna support what he was saying. Just yeah, like, I think we should ask for a lot of detail. This feels like very, for supportive housing, like we ask so much. We need to understand from top to bottom. We need to see like 15 years of a budget plan. So like and honestly, this feels higher stakes than supportive housing, like, because we're talking about like very high needs behavioral healthcare. So I would want to get a lot of info. So yeah, I would just second what Chris has said and really kind of fleshing these out and what level of detail we want.
Dana, would you be able to share what the
Yeah.
information, like a template or whatever that you use, so that we could take a look at that?
Yeah, I can send you our old notebooks. It's a little more chunked out now that we have this new centralized process, but I'll see what I can piece together. I can also like share with you kind of like yeah, I'll see what I can do. I'll figure out a way to get that a
Okay,
picture of that to you.
thank you. That would be helpful. So there's an additional question here that's highlighted, that was added in, and that fits really well with this, with the third bullet down. Okay, so it's a sub-bullet to this
Yeah, so we were trying to capture more peer involvement or peer support consideration um, for service delivery. So that was one way that we thought we could loop that in to see if that's something that's part of their service delivery model and how they've identified that that's unique to their community need.
I like that. I think that's very good. Yeah. So any additional feedback around that one?
I really like that. I would say, I think we would want to say specifically like around service design and maybe even if they're building something around physical design. I think there's a lot of like input that can shape a space. I don't know, maybe OJ feels differently about that, but I know I like to have people with lived experience inform a physical space as well, like how things are set up. But that might not be the right fit for what we're building here.
I love when there's a trauma-informed design factored into a project.
Well, and especially if it's a place where people are going to be spending a lot of time, you know, they need to be comfortable there.
Sure. Yeah, nothing says we care about you like ratty old furniture, right?
Or sterile white walls.
Or zero white walls, yes. Well, I feel like we've made a lot of progress. I think we can go ahead and incorporate this last bit of feedback, and then we will send it out to you. And I think we're going to post then to get this thing issued, which is very exciting.
And then how long will applicants have to respond?
We were thinking, I don't know, we haven't completely, I think that question we need to fully develop the response to. I mean, what did we come up with? I think that we were thinking like 3 months. But we can pull, in Chris's point, about comparing apples to apples or oranges to oranges. I mean, I think we could, halfway through that, pull what we have and begin evaluating them. I mean, I think it's going to need to be an evaluation, a project by project evaluation because of the broadness of the categories.
Mhm.
So, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
Additionally, we're going to host the what are they called, LaDonna? Sorry.
Technical
Technical
webinars.
assist.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you
To
for
answer
that
questions
reminder.
for partners too. So we'll make
Yeah.
sure we have enough time
Yeah.
to do a couple of those.
Yeah, that was a really important reminder. Thank you. And what we'll do from those Tech Assist webinars is we'll gather all of the questions, we'll create FAQs from the Tech Assist, and then we'll post those to our webpage. We will share that link out. So we want to try to set people up best we can to submit successful applications. So. Well, looks like y'all might get 15 minutes back in your day. I feel like we were really productive. So thank you. It's good to
Thank
see
you all. Nice work.
Thanks for being here. You were helpful, Sissy.
Yay.
Good to see y'all. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Take care.
Thank
You
you.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, I don't know how to hang up. How do I hang up? There I go. There, that's how I leave.